I was home from boarding school with a few friends of mine, all female, around 16 at the time. My parents are very strict, which, looking back, I love them for. And so, simply for the sake of some excitement, my friends and I decided to sneak out one night. I lived in a small beach suburb of a small town, and it was a Tuesday night, so there really was no reason to sneak out. But we decided it would be fun to go and spend the night sitting on the beach, drinking and talking, and refusing to accept that the summer holidays were almost over. To get out of my house unseen, we had to take the fly screen out of my bedroom window and climb out onto the garage roof, which was dangerously slanted. We walked across the garage roof and then jumped down into the bushes of the neighbor's yard, and then we were free. Thinking that the escape itself would be the most exciting part of our night, we headed down to the beach with a towel to sit on and some ancient cruisers, a sweet alcoholic drink, that my older sister had left behind and were probably far past their use-by date. We sat on the beach and, not surprisingly, were very quickly bored and considering heading home. I should mention that we were all very well-behaved young girls, and this was probably the most adventurous thing we had done, so in our paranoia of getting caught, we had walked a good 20 minutes down the beach away from home and out of sight of houses. As we finished our drinks and started to pack up, one of the girls noticed a light a fair way down the beach from us, closer to home. Even though it was the middle of the night, it could have easily been a fisherman or some other logical explanation, but we all immediately felt that sinking feeling of dread. While we decided whether to head home and have to pass the light on the beach or stay and hope that it went away, we not only noticed that the light was actually getting closer, but also that a second light had appeared in the distance at the other end of the beach, leaving us in the middle of two distant, unknown figures. Freaking out a little, as 16-year-old girls do, we sat frozen, debating what to do and genuinely considering hiding in the bushes behind the beach, despite the fact that these unknown people approaching were probably well-meaning. Before we could even make up our minds, we started to hear voices approaching, young male voices yelling and bickering and laughing. The men on one side closed in on us quickly, seemingly surprised to find other people on the beach, but introduced themselves and were charismatic and good-looking, so we were somewhat put at ease. Within minutes, a couple more young men from the other direction also came across us and clearly knew the first group, who by this stage had sat down and started talking to us. They said that they were tourists visiting and had nothing better to do, so decided to take their drinks to the beach. Looking back, I think of how uncomfortable I felt in my gut, but we were just young, naive girls and felt flattered by the attention of older, attractive guys. We sat with them for at least an hour. The conversation was normal enough, but a few of the guys were getting uncomfortably touchy with us, hands on our upper thighs, lower backs, arms around us, and not letting us go when we were clearly trying to pull away. We politely tried to leave more than once, but each time the guys would beg us to stay, or make excuses why we shouldn't leave yet. One of them was playing his guitar, and would even promise to play our favorite songs if we stayed. Finally, we had had enough and insisted on leaving, saying that our parents would wake up soon and realize we had snuck out. Big mistake telling them that nobody knew where we were, but we weren't thinking and just wanted to get out of there. We started the 20-minute walk home along the beach, and a few of the guys insisted on walking with us to make sure we got home safely. The whole walk home was filled with more uncomfortable groping, with us girls even making up fake boyfriends to try and get them to stop without seeming rude. I now see that being polite is a creep's best friend. Despite only 3 of the guys leaving with us when we started walking home and the rest staying on the beach, we noticed that they had actually all started following as soon as we were far enough away to be mostly out of sight. We were all so relieved when my house finally came into view, obviously not wanting them to know where we lived, but we were desperate to get away from them. We hastily said our goodbyes and started walking towards the neighbor's house. We had to go through their yard to sneak back into my house, when one of the guys started laughing and shouted, "We know that's not where you live." We didn't stick around to find out how he knew that and sprinted into the neighbor's yard and out of sight. Luckily, we made it home safely that night. You are probably thinking that this was the typical, "I saw a scary person at night and they looked at me funny" story, but unfortunately, there is more. The next morning, we woke up to the beautiful sounds of someone strumming their guitar. It took a moment for the events of last night to sink in, and in fear, my friend next to me grabbed my arm. The song being played was "You Found Me" by The Fray. It was the song she had asked the guy to play for us. Terrified, we all peeked out of my bedroom window to see that same group of guys was staying in a holiday house on the cliff above my house, with a balcony that looks over my backyard and straight into my bedroom window. I don't want to think about how long these guys were watching us in my bedroom, getting changed, or laying on my bed laughing, or worse, sunbaking in my backyard, which we had been doing all summer while my parents were at work. As much as I wish it was a coincidence that night on the beach, I can only imagine them drinking beers on their balcony while they watched us sneak across the roof, and then deciding to follow and search for us on the beach. Why else would they split up and comb the beach from opposite ends? When people say nothing good ever happens past midnight, they say it for a reason. I, along with my girlfriend at the time, and my best friend sneaked out during that summer. We did this quite often, and each time was better than the last. I mean, the first time the three of us did set the bar really low and was easy to be beaten. It was about 1:30 a.m., and the three of us were downtown. We have weddings in our town, and as you know, these things go really late. We saw a couple stumbling on the street, dressed for a wedding that was happening that night. We started cracking jokes to each other like the dumbass teens we are, and then out of the blue I see the man hit his wife. I look over to my girlfriend and buddy, and see the look of shock on their faces. The man started screaming at her, saw us, and took off. Instantly, and against my girlfriend's wish, I ran up to the wife that was crying, face down on the ground. My girlfriend and friend were at the end of the street. I told them to give us some space. I'm trained to deal with things like this. I'm in a Navy program and know how to talk to people. She was clearly very, very intoxicated and could hardly talk. I was able to calm her down and asked her what her name was, where was she from, where is she staying, etc. This conversation went on for about 15 minutes, and by now my group had caught up with me and, like I asked, was giving me space to do my thing. She told me where she was staying, but told me she didn't know how to get there and that she was from out of town. I told her not to worry and that everything would be okay. I helped her up and started to walk to where she was staying. It was about quarter mile away, and when someone has a very difficult time walking, it takes a long time just to go 20 feet. Nonetheless, I knew this was the right thing to do and wanted to help. Coincidentally, the police station was right across the street, and thank God for this. I usually check my back when we go out at night because there are some pretty weird people where I live, and I was lucky that I was being that cautious. I turned around to see a man, tall in stature, incredibly muscular, and angry behind us and my friends. I turned to the woman and asked if that was her husband, to which she started trembling and was able to mutter, "Yes." I told my friends to get away from us because I knew things were going to get bad. They went to the other side of the street, and I could tell they were scared for me. My buddy had his phone out, ready to call 911, and my girlfriend was shaking. Then this guy was on me and his wife. He was screaming at me for having the audacity to help her and for being near his wife. The entire time I was occasionally glancing down at his hands when they weren't in my face, to make sure they weren't in fists. I never said anything to try to start more of an argument, only things like, "Sir, you need to step away from me," and "You need to calm down. The police station is just across the street," things that you would say to avoid getting the shit beaten out of you. I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'2", and feel like I am not someone people want to mess with. But I'm under 18. This guy was probably in his early 30s, about 6'4" and 100% muscle. Very, very scary man. I looked down, saw his hands in a fist, and stepped back quickly, keeping his wife behind me. This wasn't smart. Standing in between a drunken man and his wife is a big, big no-no. I mouthed to my friend, "Get the police right now." And he turned around and sped the other way. The police didn't notice me doing this, so I figured I was good. The police answered my buddy, and he was pointing over to us, but they didn't come out. It took them about 5 minutes to come out, and by then, the guy fled. I told them what happened, and they sent out a search team for this guy. Turns out he was hiding on the road we were on just a little down the way. The police took the woman and escorted her back to where she was staying, and kept the man in the station for the night. They thanked me for what I did, and told my friends and me that we should go home. We agreed, as youth does, and went on our way. The moral of this story is, if you see someone who needs help, help them. It is up to you. Be the hero they need. This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at the time this happened, I was 12 going on 13 in just a month or two. The friend I mentioned in this story was 14. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, was quite a bit older than me. At least at the time, the 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally should have been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, and I think that was what drew me to her at first. We became fast friends, and before we knew it, we're spending every single weekend together. Seriously, every single weekend. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on the Pop-Tart that I'd stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something that I wouldn't eat. Something to note is that her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far as to say they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mom obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the age we were, we gave each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than just 12 and 14. This part of the night is when things started to seem off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my best friend at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some texts between her and the man she was talking to. I can't give you an exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him and just the usual things you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde with soulful blue eyes. Once I saw the texts, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40 and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Then we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation, and when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come meet me?" he asked. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest, and then he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus begun her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen, and I needed to defend myself. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front passenger seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flash on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was, maybe 6'2", around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages, even without makeup. I'm about 5'2". My friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'7". We were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friends getting out of the car. He invited us back to his car and offered us booze and drugs, but after seeing my knife and that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I ever had in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived in case they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked him on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the window, and to our dismay, that same Toyota was circling around her apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say, Sally and I haven't spoken 3 years. She was pissed at me for ruining her night, and our friendship didn't last for long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it now, it was definitely for the better.